past, I saw a need for a place where the cannabis community could gather and consume cannabis respectfully and responsibly. And so we set out to create a clean, comfortable atmosphere that the cannabis consumer would enjoy coming to, that helped promote cannabis science, cannabis as a medicine, and that would also promote cannabis consumption in a safe manner, responsible transportation, stuff to that effect. So that was really what guided us and drove us to open Speakeasy in the first place. Yeah.
Let's learn a little bit about you, Jaymen.
Sure.
All right, tell me a little bit about you. I mean, family man, are you married?
I'm married 13 years. We have 2 fur babies, or dogs, as you know, some people call them, but those are our babies, if you ask us. I consider myself a family man. I consider myself a community person above all else. I'm very close with my cannabis community. They're a family to me, and you know, I've been in the industry now going on close to 8 years, the majority of that on the medical side. So I have a great respect for the licensed medical community. And what I wanted was a place where they could have their Christmas parties, come together after work, socialize, what we all enjoy with what we're familiar with the alcohol establishments and how we enjoy that, maybe after a long day of work, going with friends, getting a drink. For some of us, we would prefer to be able to sit with those same friends and smoke or do some dabs and have conversations. So that's what Speakeasy was created for.
In the couple of years since recreational marijuana was approved, the big question has got to be safety, because that's a big concern in Colorado Springs and other communities across Colorado. What do you do as a responsible owner of Speakeasy Lounge to ensure that the people who smoke here and imbibe are not going to be going out on the roads or doing something else?
Well, that's a good question. One of the things is that we saw the benefit. One of the things that we're lucky to have in this new emerging industry is the voters recognize the logic behind regulating it like alcohol. They voted for that because they realized that that was the safest, best way to do it. And so we are actually lucky where alcohol has gone through 100 years of development. We get to kind of take from them their example and get to bypass the evolution and get there a little bit quicker. So what we did is we incorporated a lot of the same standards, that same line of responsibility that we're all familiar with alcohol. We know what a bartender's responsibilities are. We know that they are to monitor the rate of consumption, they're to gauge the level of inebriation, they're to take attempts to sober an individual who is too inebriated, and they're to offer safe transportation alternatives to those who would take advantage of it. What we've done is adopt those same standards for ourselves. It's not a requirement. You know, unfortunately, at this time, there is no requirements of us. This is a self-governing situation. But this was what we felt was in best for the community that we reside in, and was most responsible. So that's what we ended up adopting. So.
Recently, the City Council had approved 6-3. A ban on cannabis clubs and others, and it won't be banned for the year until the year 2024. Right now we're at 2016. A business that you built is now 8 years from now, unless there's some other rules or regulations or there's a new city council, you are going to be out of business. Tell me about that. I mean, when you learned that, when we were there on Gazette.com, seeing this happen and watching this evolution, tell me about that.
Well, luckily, I've had a few days to mull it over and consider and weigh the realities of what we're dealing with. But as you could see that the day of, you know, I wasn't too pleased with this. It was, I think anyone that put as much time and energy and work and as much as themselves into a project like this as I have, you know, would be hurt and dismayed by the decisions of City Council to just basically turn a blind eye to it. But as we look at it, you know, you bring up a good point. We're talking about 2024. And if we look at the public perception of cannabis in the 80s versus the 90s versus 2000 versus 2010 versus today in 2016, I just find it hard to believe that almost a decade from now, in 2024, that there'll be a resurgence of a reefer madness mentality, or that we'll somehow slip back into cannabis prohibition. I believe that time is on my side when it comes to this. We will have a few new councils within that 8-year period. We will have new representatives, city and state level. And 8 years is a long time to go and show the reasoning and sensibility behind our argument. So, you know, I'm optimistic, but it was very disconcerting to see that everything we've done as of yet could be so easily disregarded.
One thing that comes to mind by a lot of people who are concerned about the cannabis industry, the new burgeoning cannabis industry in Colorado Springs, in southern Colorado, and across our state, is the fact that there isn't that enforcement. There are not specific regulations. And I know Representative Jonathan Singer out of Longmont, no relation by the way, is trying to push that factor that isn't there, because obviously the way you run your business is different than the way some other cannabis owner shop may run it.
Well, through the Southern Colorado Cannabis Council, through people like Jason Wharf, and then working with Singer, we've been an integral part in developing these processes. But you're right, there is no, and this is an issue, as I've stated on record many times, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. The answer is not prohibition. The answer is not moratoriums or bans. You only feed and empower the gray area when you do that. If you give a paved path, if you allow for licensing and regulation for people to adhere to, people will they will elect to stand in line to do those processes, and they will have regulations that they must abide by in order to continue their licensing. By doing these prohibitions and leaving it up to court battles, you only empower the gray area. You only prolong the inevitable. You make it to where these companies don't have to contribute. You make it to where they can test the limits of their capabilities, rather than you know, just giving us the structure. And what I guess is most upsetting for me is that some of us have elected to govern ourselves. We are right. There is very few rules to what we do at this time. So those that you see that have a semblance of structure, those that that say we won't do this or we won't do that, that is elected upon themselves. They're governing themselves because they find it to be in the most respect. And this is something that it appears the local governing body has elected to ignore. That we've actually, a great majority of us, have shown respect and consideration to our communities, to the city, and we actually turned to them and brought these problems to light ourselves and asked for their help, and this was the response we got.
So what kind, and by the way, if you're just joining us, I'm Eric Singer, Gazette.com, along with Jaymen Johnson, and we're at the Speakeasy Vape Lounge and Cannabis Club on East Bijou, and we're trying to get this Q&A going so that people understand inside, because this is a rare look inside a cannabis lounge, and I see a lot of comments that are coming up, so if you have questions for Jaymen, I'm happy to answer them. For
Please,
example,
yes.
Here's a good comment from someone. This is from Sandra Lee Plunk, who writes, what about City Council and County Commission staying out of A20 and A64 completely? You know, that's something, obviously, we have elected leaders for a reason, and there was also something built in, as I believe, within the law that said that individual communities can opt out of, you know, cannabis clubs, etc., and be able to make a sort of home rule philosophy. What ordinances and regulations would you like to see in place, Jaymen? Well,
and see, and I have one foot in both. So I believe that there needs to be development at the state level. This is how we make sure that at least the bedrock on which everything is developed is even and fair for all people, and that everyone has an opportunity to do this. But when you look at it, it really shouldn't be just like alcohol. When we make the parallels to alcohol, there are dry counties. There are areas where it is not permitted. So I believe that it should be up to the local municipality, because the goal and the object of local government is to enforce the will of the people. But what we're not seeing in Colorado Springs is that the will of the people is being enforced. We have every step of the way been able to demonstrate public support. They have failed in that regard on numerous occasions, but they seem more interested with pushing personal belief or personal agenda than actually weighing and establishing the will of their constituents within their district and voting accordingly. What you have is people putting their own ideology on it. So I believe that local municipalities should do that, but by definition, those governing bodies are supposed to do the will of the people. So is it really the will of Colorado Springs not to have these clubs, or is this someone's personal agenda?
Well, once again, Jaymen, the question for me would be, because there are those parents, family members, others who would say, well, I'm concerned that this could be close to my home, to my church, to my synagogue, to some place that I would feel uncomfortable with.
Got you.
What would what regulations could you foresee with Representative Singer and others? Once again, no relationship, Jonathan Singer and I, just the last name.
Right.
What would you see as ways to somehow make them feel comfortable about cannabis clubs in Colorado Springs?
Right. Well, I think that most of the issues can be addressed through licensing. Through licensing, you are able to control the conduct. You're able to control the zoning. You're able to control. There's so many factors that currently are unregulated that come only with licensing and regulation. They only come with that. So instead of attacking the problem head on, they're only delaying the inevitable, they're only diverting, and they're only causing more pathways for people to obtain it through legal loophole. And so what I would like to see is them address, I have no issue with petitioning my neighborhood the same way a bar would if they wanted to open. And I see no reason why that's an unreasonable. Sometimes where some of the cannabis clubs will say we should be able to do whatever we want, back off us, will give us complete freedom and complete autonomy. And then you have the other side of the spectrum where the city's trying to say we shouldn't exist at all. Where's the happy medium? Where is it that we find an amicable solution or something that shows any sort of compromise? If a bar wanted to move into a neighborhood, that bar would have to poll the neighborhood to see if they were fine with that. And if they were unable to get enough signatures saying that enough of the people in the area were fine with a bar, they would not be allowed to open. And I think the thing is that most of us club owners are saying we don't expect preferential treatment. We don't want to have abilities that others don't. We just don't want to be treated in a way that they want to be treated. It shouldn't be 3 times or 4 times more costly to open a medical facility than a pharmacy. It shouldn't be 4 times harder to open a cannabis club than a bar. And these are the simple things that we're requesting. We're only asking for fair and equal treatment.
Now, during the city council debate prior to approving the city ban, there were some on the anti-side of cannabis clubs who won, and I want you to address this. First, the smell. There is a smell to pot. Let's be real.
Sure.
How do you make sure it's not filtered out into the environment so that, because that was a concern brought up several times during the city council meeting.
Sure. I would illustrate if we didn't take such measure to disguise it and hide it. But in our ceiling, we have several CFM fans that pull the cannabis smoke out through a charcoal filter and exhaust it out of the building. We have never received a smell complaint, either online, through comment, through review, from the neighbors, from the conjoining businesses. We have a hair salon to the right of us. We have a bar to the left of us, and neither has ever made a complaint about it. I believe these are all things that need to be addressed. If you don't tell a cannabis bar that they need to address this, then many will opt not to. But again, these are all issues that are only addressed when licensing and regulation comes into play. If you tell me that I'm responsible for smell mitigation, then it becomes a requirement. And so then I have to, and it's not something I elect to do anymore, but I'm required to do.
Okay, Jaymen, another question comes to mind. obviously you're slowly but surely getting a group of people. You know, it's just like a bar.
Yeah.
You have it's sort of like a Cheers type, except in
It
this
is.
case, without alcohol, it's with
Everyone
cannabis.
knows your strain. That's our slogan, where everyone knows your strain. You like that, Eric. I dig it.
It was pretty funny, I gotta say.
Eric,
That was
I got
pretty
Eric
good.
to laugh,
You
guys.
gotta-
I got Eric to laugh.
You gotta be real.
Contact high, maybe? No, I'm just kidding, Eric. I'm just
So
kidding.
no. So my question would be, obviously, and I'm going to pan around a little bit because you said it
Excellent.
was okay. And
The
we're
club
gonna be
looks
looking
better
around.
than I do, so please.
And so while we're talking, I mean, we're seeing different people who have come here on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And it's starting to fill up slowly but surely. So my
We just
question
opened the
is-
doors, so
Right.
yeah, it's that early crowd, yeah.
So my question is this: how do you ensure? Because today, for example, there was a conference going on in the Denver area, specifically talking with law enforcement and law enforcement and DAs, etc., people in the legal
A work
profession.
session trying to
Work
figure
session.
this out. Yeah.
Correct, and talking specifically. Let me read something that was a quote from that.
Sure.
Because this is on Chun Sun's story on Gazette and Gazette.com.
Excellent.
This was someone who said, what we can't say is this mixed use of marijuana and alcohol. I can't tell you how many arrests out there are. So in other words, my question would be, how can you ensure that someone didn't come in here drinking, then gets high, then goes back out and causes that accident? What do you do to ensure your clients don't cause problems?
Yes, I think what my friend is trying to point out, we have signs all throughout the
All right,
club
let's go. You know
that
what?
talk about.
Let's go ahead and I'd like you to show me now. Now remember,
Yeah.
everybody, we are tethered. Just FYI, so it's going to walk a little slowly. AJ's going to come with me. But okay.
Well, just to show the closest one, but they're all over the club. We have, signs up that encourage people to contact us if they, to contact one of the representatives within the club if they feel that they are in any way in any danger. To answer your question directly, though, is I think that the more accurate statement of what they're trying to say is they have statistics on how many people have been arrested or been charged with DUI for alcohol. They have statistics on how many people have been charged with DUI for marijuana. What they are not familiar with is how many have combined the two, and they don't have statistics to speak to that. My answer to that is the law still clearly states that you have a line of responsibility. So if they're drunk or high or drunk and high, where does that matter? They're still responsible for the choices they made. We, as an establishment, are still responsible for facilitating them and not taking measure. If a bartender, back when I was a child, the standard responsibility for a bartender, if someone was too drunk, was to go take him and put him in his car and put his seatbelt on him and say, "Get out of here, Chuck. You're drunk." Today, that would not stand. That bartender would be facing charges for such action. But at one time, that was the normal, everyday reaction from a bartender, is to kick the gentleman out into public. And now we have a line of responsibility. If someone chooses to go and drive drunk, they then follow that back to the establishment. Did the establishment tell him he was too inebriated? Did they attempt to sober him up? Did they offer to call him a cab? And if they took those measures, the bar is now no longer responsible. They did their portion, and it comes down to personal responsibility of the person who chose to drive inebriated. If we're held to that same standard and we're required, and I fail to do that, then I should be held responsible. And if I succeed in doing that, then I should not be held responsible. And that would be my answer to those issues.
Okay, now let's go back a little bit to that ban that's going to be in the year 2024. There was also talk during that city council meeting that potentially all the cannabis clubs could move into a certain area. In other words, have almost like a business zone, an enterprise zone. Would that be something that you'd be in favor of, or?
I don't know. Let me ask if the city that they're claiming to represent that is so uncomfortable with this, would they be happy with a little Amsterdam? Is that the solution to this problem, is to have a designated section and corner of the city which is permitted to allow all this? It seems counterintuitive to the purpose of clubs. It doesn't seem to be what the people are asking for. It just seems to be you know, one of the solutions that's being presented is maybe let's all sweep them into one corner. I take umbrance with that I'm told that I have 8 years to recruit and to recoup my initial investments, but that at the end of my lease, I am required to start the process over again at another location that meets the zoning requirements. So I have 8 years to get back my investment, but in 2 years I have to do the investment all over again. Do I get 8 years from that point then? Or, you know, that, I mean, there's so much of this that is unanswered. You know, what are we facing if we don't close? You know, what does this ordinance, what is the violation of this ordinance equate to? Is it a misdemeanor? Is it a felony? Am I ticketed, or will I have tape on my door saying do not break seal? What is it that we're facing? Do the council members even know what they voted for?
How many council members have come into clubs like this? I know the ones who voted.
I will commend Councilman Murray for going to Studio A64. I will commend Representative Roop, Kit Roop, for coming in here and checking us out. We also, for the first 2 years we were open, invited law enforcement on a regular basis to come in. And for the first 2 years, they took us up on that. We contacted them quarterly to come in and kind of review our processes. After about 2 years, the question became, well, have you changed anything? And no, we pretty much operate the same. Well, then we're okay with it and we don't need to come in. Now, a year after that, being the standard answer I started getting, a year later, now it's there's a public outcry for something to be done, and we're an epidemic apparently.
But law enforcement have said they have made, not to this location, but to other location cannabis clubs,
sure,
that potentially there were problems at them, and it escalated since these cannabis clubs. Your response to that would be?
Well, and we invited them in regularly, and this isn't the norm for most clubs. And several of the clubs, I would venture to say this is not accurate of our club. It's not accurate of Studio A64. It's not accurate of many of them. And several of us that have invited them in, you know, we wouldn't be doing that if there was issue or reason to be for them to be discerning and to judge us. We invite them in because we want to illustrate our safety and our reliability within our communities, you know. But the council members, I have unfortunately not had a council member myself come into Speakeasy. I would welcome them. I would relish an opportunity to maybe change their minds, like I have law enforcement, like I have my neighbor who was in law enforcement for a number of years. I would really like to be given the opportunity to show them that it isn't what they think it is.
Okay, then you show us.
Okay,
take us around.
Come on.
Slowly, remember your
I am tethered. I keep hitting the cord too. I'm sorry, guys. All right. Well, as you can see, I mean, we're really a lounge in its definition. What we set up was a place where people could come and consume in the manner that they choose most fitting in a comfortable and clean atmosphere. I think when you look around, you can understand.
Show us around. Tell us what's going on. We'll follow you.
Sure. So we have our gift shop here. This is we sublease this to Smoking Iguana. This illustrates again the other businesses, the ancillary businesses that are affected by this. Smoking Iguana. How many locations you guys got across the state now? You have. Is this your 5th location?
Yeah. We also own my Beer and Haberdashers out of Buffalo, and then we have a location here in Colorado Springs and Wilson, Canada.
So they have about 5 locations, this being their 5th location, and you know, throughout the state. And this goes to show, this also illustrates T-shirt companies, banner companies, the contractors. There's so many companies that have become reliant on cannabis industry that is not being considered here. This is our cannabis bar. People are permitted to bring their own, which is what most locals opt to do. Linda here, obviously, bringing her own to use the bar. The purpose of the cannabis on the shelf was to help those who come from out of state. One of the issues we experienced early on, we were strictly bring your own for about a year. And one thing that happened, a slow development that ended up taking place as a result of that was the tourists would come, many times from the hotel would take a cab over to us. When they arrived, we would explain that we did not have cannabis, that they would need to call the cab back, drive to the neighboring town of Manitou, make a purchase there, bring a cab ride back to here, and then consume here because they were not permitted in their hotels. They were not permitted in parks or any other location or restaurants or bars. And so this was really their only safe place to consume. Well, many of them found that to be too much work. So they would turn to means like social media, Facebook, or Craigslist, and they would contact people that were offering cannabis on there. After so many times of those people coming here, they started camping out here. They would try to peddle their goods within the club. When we pushed them out of the club, they would hang out in the parking lot or across the street. But once we were offered cannabis in small quantity for on-site consumption only, exactly the same way you are familiar with a liquor establishment, all those problems went away. The tourist doesn't need 2 ounces. He doesn't want a quarter pound. He wants to be able to do a dab or smoke a joint in a social setting. He's looking for that Amsterdam type experience, and that's what they want.
All right, can we, now you have to get close because you've got the microphone on.
Sure.
If we can, I'd like to just talk to 2 of the consumers. All right, first.
I can get close to Linda.
Oh, there you go.
I can get real close to Linda.
So Linda, all right, so tell me, why do you come here and how safe do you feel here? And what would you, and also the last question, the most important question would be, for those who are upset with cannabis clubs in Colorado Springs, your response to them would be?
I came here because I've been to over 40 doctors in the state I lived in, and I came here to seek cannabis as my medicine. It has actually cured me. I was on 17 meds, got off all those, and lost 80 pounds by coming here to the club. I walked here twice a day, and throughout the community here and the people I met, I was able to reach out to other resources that helped me with my cannabis supply. I have cancer, and they've been real generous. And people are going to come here seeking it, whether they have small children sick, whether they're sick, and it's not going to go away. So people need a safe place to come to, and I've always felt safe here from day one.
If the cannabis clubs are, they are banned and potentially could go by the year 2024, what happens to you?
I believe that we're going to turn that around. I just have full faith that the people here are here to stay, and there's going to be more people coming, and we're just going to be an example for the rest of the states to follow.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for talking with us. And because we have only a few more minutes left, I got to ask you a question. Let's go behind the bar. Are we allowed behind the bar?
Yeah, absolutely. Come on.
I mean, I'd like to talk to, I guess, for lack of a term,
Even rarer, even rarer look behind the bar. How about that?
So let's talk a little bit. First, and go ahead and get closer.
Yeah,
if you would.
no worries.
Go ahead and say your name, if you would.
Okay, my name is Emily McNamara.
All right, Emily, we were just talking about personal responsibility and also for those who are concerned about cannabis clubs in Colorado Springs, how to ensure that the person who comes here doesn't imbibe too much and then drive while high.
Well, I am very well trained in all areas of that. I think I always get somebody's personal background, ask them, if they've dabbed before, if they,
Dab, what does that mean?
It's the concentrate.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of a different thing, and it's actually super important for a lot of the out-of-staters and some of the new smokers that that's where I think a lot of the overconsumption happens, because they're a little less familiar with the concentrates and kind of how they're made, or the effects different, how it's different
So
from
is
the
that
cannabis.
dab that's in that little green?
Correct.
What's green over
Yeah,
there? That's
Cannabis
okay.
concentrate, yeah, and it's referred to as dabs most often, but cannabis concentrate is what it would be.
So how potent would this be compared to, say, for example, something that someone would have smoked in the 70s, 80s, etc.?
Well, I guess comparatively, it's like I would say it's smoking maybe a bowl to yourself or a joint to yourself, and that of course affects everybody a little bit differently. Their tolerances, if you can actually sit down and smoke a full joint to yourself, but that's usually what. Right, and that's usually what I always explain, afterwards is sit down, I offer water, let the effects you know, kind of
Dissipate
set
a bit.
in.
Yeah.
And, you know, if there is a problem, you know, with feeling uncomfortable with transportation, you know, there's options as food or water, waiting it out, calling a taxi, Uber,
How many times
friends.
have you called a taxi or transportation for somebody? You personally?
You know, once or twice. For a majority of the time, I can explain, you know, maybe get some food in them, calm them down, hang out a little bit longer. But it happens. I mean, a couple of times, yeah.
But you're trying your best to be as responsible as you can. And one thing that
To not
Jaymen
even-
said is the personal responsibility aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we take what she's explaining is we take the same measure, and this is something we discuss all the time. When a person is dead, we encourage them to hang out for a while, for them to let us know if they're feeling like they need any assistance or need any help. We have them sit down, we get them water. You know, the same way if a bartender, if they just serve someone several drinks, would say, hey man, hang out with us for a while. You know, let it get out of your system a bit. If you need a cab, let us know. We'll call one for you. And those are the things that we do. When she's talking about finding out someone's personal history, something we discuss all the time is, you know, for a gentleman maybe coming from Texas who says that he's been smoking every day of his life, but does he mean a joint a day, you know, for the last 30 years? Well, when you're dealing with a concentrate that is a 10 gram to 1 gram ratio, then his experience with cannabis in its raw form is moot, and it isn't really applicable at this time. So, and that's the whole thing, is they may say, oh, I've been smoking weed my whole life, but if this is their first dab, it's completely different. That's like saying I've been drinking beer my whole life, but if this is your first shot of vodka, that it's not, you can't parallel the two. So then we have to take into account that, and we have to be prepared to respond accordingly.
We're about to wrap up, but final thoughts for those who are watching and for those who are concerned about cannabis clubs in Colorado Springs. Your message to them would be?
My message would be that I'm as concerned as they are, and I would like to see I'd like to see the city and the state be progressive on this. I'd like us to see us take a national leading stance on this. Cannabis is going to evolve. It's going to continue to move forward. It's going to continue to be industrialized in this state and across the country. And here's our opportunity to set the example, to set the structure that maybe others adopt. Maybe we could go down in history as the people that solved these problems, rather than staying them off, making them someone else's issue. And that's really what we're doing. At this point, what we're doing is we're making it someone else's future problem instead of addressing it now. And I would like to see that we get that so that everyone can get what they want. The people can know their neighborhoods are safe. I can get the licensing that I crave, and so on down the line. We know that I have to conduct myself a certain way, what I am and am not permitted to do.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jaymen Johnson, and
Appreciate it.
thank you for your patrons being able to be here, so they can be able to let us talk with them a little bit here at the Speakeasy Vape Lounge and Cannabis Club here in Colorado Springs, and hopefully you've learned something as well. We're trying to make sure that these Q&As and these messages. I'm doing it on Facebook, so if you're wondering why I'm holding my camera.
It's camera showdown.
So I just want to make sure that you got your answers from Jaymen, and of course we'll continue to have these kinds of conversations on the Gazette, Gazette.com, and of course on Facebook.
Can I make an offer real quick?
Sure.
If you have any questions I haven't answered that you are concerned about, our email address is speakeasycolorado@gmail. Speakeasy Colorado, Colorado all spelled out. Send me any questions you have, and I'll gladly answer them personally.
All right. Well,
Okay?
thank you so much,
Thank
Jaymen,
you.
and thank you all for watching. I'm Eric Singer with video journalist AJ Kievanar, live on Gazette.com. See you next time.